The last song we want to talk about is Dire Straits' Romeo and Juliet. What a song. What a songwriter. Mark Knopfler is, I think, one of those songwriters who doesn't get talked about much. Doesn't get mentioned in, the discussions about great songwriters. But for me, he is an amazing songwriter because he found a way, I think, to balance all of these beautiful elements. Great guitar work, great musicianship from the whole band, beautiful structures, a lot of diversity in his songs. And then you have this song, Romeo and Juliet, which is really just very sweet. And it's got this beautiful intro, which is the part I want to talk about first. So the intro of Romeo and Juliet arguably is the most famous part of the song, that's in itself a little bit odd. It's not the main melody, it's not the chorus of the song, it's this little intro that he plays that I'll play for you now. So that's the intro, or something like that. That's close. It's not quite what Mark Knopfler wrote, but that intro, as soon as people hear it, the first moment, you know the song, you recognize the song, and it's this beautiful little melody that's separate from the rest of the song. And by that I mean it's not the main melody, it's not the chorus. You hear it, and within a second you recognize the song, and people love that intro. You always see when people are listening to this song, that little intro brings a smile to everyone's face. And that for me was quite an eye-opening experience as a kid, because I just always thought you started a song with, maybe the chorus chords or just holding a chord, 4 bars of just holding a static chord and then into the song. It was the first time I'd heard a melodic section or a whole idea on its own written to be the intro. And it's the first time I'd heard it so effectively done. So that in itself is interesting. But then you realize that he's written about a 400-year-old story. And again, this was one of those things where I think I heard Billy Collins talk about this in his masterclass, that he had studied a poet who wrote a poem about Elvis. And he said, I didn't realize you were allowed to write poems about Elvis. I thought poetry was meant to be about other things. And he's like, well, I'm going to write one about Fats Domino then, or. And it's this idea that Mark Knopfler's taken a 400-year-old story, a very famous 400-year-old story, Romeo and Juliet, everyone knows it, and he's brought it into contemporary storytelling. He's turned it into a pop song. Mm. And he started off with, the lyrics, a love-struck Romeo sings a street serenade, laying everybody low with a love song that he made. This idea of telling the story of the story almost, it gets a bit meta. And yet, the thing I love about Mark Knopfler and this song in particular is it never takes itself too seriously. As it develops into the chorus, it's kind of playful, tongue-in-cheek, about the timing being wrong. So I think the most valuable thing I took away from this really is the idea that a song doesn't have to be about whatever happened today or yesterday. Or it doesn't have to be about what's happening in your life or someone else's life that you've just been speaking to. This idea that songs can draw from anywhere. They can draw from a 400-year-old story. They can draw from a poem you've just read, a movie you've just watched. That idea is huge because I think as songwriters, we do feel the burden of having to come up with the material all ourselves. It all has to come from our experience and it has to be all, about us. And that there's a huge amount of pressure in that. Mm. So that's a big deal to be able to say, well, I can draw from all of these other sources and repurpose them into song form. Mm. One more thing about this song was it's in open tuning. And you only find that out when you try and play it, when you actually sit down to learn how to play it. And that riff, by the way, it's difficult. I was playing around with it yesterday and it shocked me that it sounds simple and yet getting your fingers around it is hard. It's difficult. And even just then, it's difficult to play. There's a beautiful lesson in that when you get something to sound easy and in fact be very difficult to execute or perform, you've done something right. You've done something well, whether it be a lyric or a melodic idea. And the fact that it's also in open tuning, for anyone who's looking for a way to break out of old patterns, looking for a way to try something new, if you play guitar, you should be playing with open tunings. I had never experienced open tunings or experimented with open tunings. It's not like piano. You've got this stringed instrument where you can turn the tuners. You should do it. There are so many amazing open tunings out there, and I discovered this whole new way of playing guitar and this whole new way of constructing melodies as soon as I experimented with open tunings. And I just think that's a great way to break any kind of rut, any kind of cycle.
Awesome.